My name is Harris, and this is not just a story, it is my life. What you're about to hear is something I've carried in silence for years. And now, for the first time, I'm sharing it with you here on Revenge Depth. Before I begin, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from? I'd love to know. Drop it in the comments below. And if stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and truth mean something to you, then please like this video, share it with others, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life inspired stories. Now, let me take you to the beginning. I wasn't born into wealth or privilege. My hands were calloused, my back bent, my days long, and my nights sleepless. But none of that mattered, because from the moment my son came into this world, I had only one purpose: to give him everything I never had. You see, when you become a parent, something changes inside you. Suddenly your own dreams seem less important. Your own needs fade into the background. Every ounce of energy, every drop of sweat, every late night of exhaustion, it all funnels into one thing: your child's future. And that's exactly what I did. I worked in places most men avoided. I took jobs no one else wanted. If it meant keeping food on the table and books in my son's hands, I would do it. While others spent their weekends celebrating, I was working double shifts. While families traveled on holidays, I was saving every penny to pay tuition fees. I gave up the things I wanted in life, so he wouldn't have to. I sold the few valuables I owned to buy his textbooks. I borrowed money when bills stacked too high. I ate less so he could eat enough. It didn't matter what I suffered, as long as he was moving forward, and he did. Year by year, I watched him climb. From school to college, from late nights studying to finally holding that degree in his hands. I can't describe the pride I felt the day he called me to say, "Dad, I made it." It was as if every sacrifice I had made was finally worth it. When he found a good job, my chest swelled with pride. I thought, this is it. This is the moment I've been waiting for. The day will come when my son will look at me and say, "This is my father, the man who gave me everything." But life has a cruel way of reminding you that dreams don't always match reality. I started noticing small changes in him. At first I brushed them off. He didn't call as often. He sounded distracted, distant. Sometimes his tone felt colder than before. But I told myself, he's busy. He's working hard. This is just what happens when young men grow into their own lives. A father's heart is quick to forgive, quick to make excuses. Then one day the call came. "Dad," he said, "I want you to come to my office tomorrow." My heart nearly stopped. Could this be the day? The moment I had imagined countless times. Maybe he wanted me to meet his colleagues. Maybe he wanted to show me his world. Maybe, just maybe, he wanted to tell them about the man who sacrificed everything for him. That night I barely slept. I pressed my old shirt until the creases were gone. I polished my worn shoes until they almost shined. And when I looked into the mirror, I saw a tired man, but a proud one. "Michael," I whispered to myself, "tomorrow is the day your sacrifices will finally be seen." The next morning I walked toward his office. My heart raced with each step. My hands shook, but inside me, hope burned brighter than ever. I imagined him smiling, introducing me, saying the words I had always longed to hear. I reached the door. My chest was heavy, but not with fear, with pride. My entire life had led to this moment, but what I didn't know was that the moment inside that office would break something inside me that had taken a lifetime to build. And those words, those unforgettable words, would haunt me forever. But that, my friends, I will share with you. I still remember the sound of that door opening. My heart was racing, but my smile was steady. As I stepped into the office, the polished floors, the glass walls, and the buzzing voices of young professionals made me pause for a moment. My son stood there, dressed in a sharp suit, confident and surrounded by an air of authority I had only ever dreamed of for him. For a second, I simply watched him, my chest swelling with pride. This is my boy, I thought. This is what all those sleepless nights, all those sacrifices were for. He looked at me and gave a quick nod. Not the warm embrace I had imagined, but I brushed it aside. Maybe he was just busy. Maybe he was holding himself in front of his colleagues. I understood, or at least I wanted to. He gestured for me to sit in the corner of the room while he finished a brief conversation. I sat down, quietly observing him. Every word he spoke, every confident gesture, it was like watching the future I had prayed for unfold in front of me. Soon a group of his colleagues gathered around. Laughter filled the room, mixed with the sound of papers shuffling and phones ringing. My heart beat faster. This is it, I thought. Any moment now he'll introduce me. He'll tell them who I am. I imagined his words. This is my father, the man who gave me everything. The reason I'm standing here today. But those words never came. He looked at me once, briefly, then quickly turned back to his group. They laughed, they talked, they celebrated some recent success. And I sat there invisible. Minutes felt like hours. I tried to convince myself he was waiting for the right moment, that he wanted the perfect time to bring me into the conversation. But the longer I waited, the more the silence weighed on me. Finally, one of his colleagues noticed me. A young man, probably in his late 20s, turned to my son and asked, "Hey, who's that? Is he family?" My heart leapt. The moment had come, but the look on my son's face, it wasn't pride. It wasn't joy. It was hesitation, almost discomfort. He cleared his throat, glanced at me, and then looked away. "This is," he started. My chest tightened. Every nerve in my body waited for the next words. "This is someone who helped me a lot while I was growing up." That was it. Nothing more. No father, no dad, no the man who gave me everything. Just someone. The room moved on, the conversation shifted, but inside me something cracked. I sat there smiling faintly, pretending not to care, but every word cut deeper than a knife. I wasn't expecting gifts. I wasn't expecting glory. All I wanted, after a lifetime of sacrifice, was acknowledgement. A single word, father, but he couldn't say it. I left the office that day with a strange heaviness in my chest. The streets outside felt colder, the sky duller. I replayed his words again and again in my head. Someone who helped me a lot. Is that all I was to him? Just someone? That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Memories flashed through my mind. Carrying him on my shoulders when he was little, walking miles to pay his fees, selling my belongings just to buy his books. And now, after everything, I was just someone. But deep down, a part of me knew this wasn't the end. There was more to come, and the truth, the real truth, was far harsher than I could have ever imagined. What happened next? The words he spoke, the way he introduced me in front of others, was something that burned into my soul forever. That night after leaving his office, I walked home with 1,000 thoughts racing in my head. His words echoed over and over. This is someone who helped me a lot while I was growing up. Someone. I whispered that word to myself 100 times. Was that all I was? Just someone. Not father, not dad. Not even the man who sacrificed everything for him. Just someone. I tried to calm myself. Maybe he didn't want to reveal too much in front of his colleagues. Maybe he thought keeping things simple was better. Maybe. My mind was full of excuses. But deep inside, I knew the truth. Something was wrong. The next few days, I waited for his call. I thought he might explain. I thought maybe he would invite me again, this time with more warmth. But no call came. No explanation. Just silence. So I decided to visit him again. I told myself it was just to check on him, but the truth was, I wanted to feel needed. I wanted to feel like a father again. When I reached his apartment, I noticed how different his world was from mine. Expensive furniture, polished floors, shelves full of books and awards. It was everything I had ever wanted for him, and everything I had never had for myself. He opened the door, surprised to see me. "Dad," he said flatly, "why didn't you call first?" That tone, it wasn't the tone of a son speaking to his father. It was the tone of someone who was bothered. I smiled anyway. "I just wanted to see you. It's been a while." He sighed, stepped aside, and let me in. Inside, a few of his friends were sitting around. Young men and women, dressed in fine clothes, laughing and chatting. The moment I entered, the laughter softened. Their eyes turned toward me. I could feel their curiosity, their unspoken questions. One of them whispered, "Who's that?" I looked at my son, waiting, hoping for him to say the words I had longed to hear, but again he hesitated. He looked down, scratched his neck, and simply said, he's someone close to me. The same word again. Someone. The room moved on, but my heart didn't. I sat there, quiet, while they carried on their conversations. Every now and then, one of them glanced at me politely, but no one asked more questions. My son didn't offer more answers. I felt like a shadow in a place that should have been my home. After a while, I stood up and said, I should go. He didn't protest. He didn't say, no, stay a little longer. He simply nodded and walked me to the door. As I stepped outside, I turned to him and said softly, Son, don't ever be ashamed of me. Whatever I am, whatever I look like, remember, I gave everything for you. For a brief second, his eyes met mine. There was something there, something he wanted to say. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. He closed the door, and I was left alone in the hallway. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories flooded my mind. Carrying him on my shoulders when he was little. Walking for miles to get him enrolled in a good school. Working through the cold and rain just to pay his tuition. Every single sacrifice played before my eyes like an old film. And now, to him I was just someone. But friends, what I didn't know was that the worst was still ahead. Those words in the office and that hesitation at the apartment were just the beginning. The real pain, the moment that would scar me forever, was waiting just around the corner. I remember that evening like it was yesterday. My son had invited me to an important corporate event. It wasn't just a gathering. It was a grand banquet filled with well-dressed professionals. The kind of place where reputations are made and broken in the blink of an eye. As we entered the large hall, chandeliers glittered above our heads, and the air smelled of polished wood and expensive cologne. I walked in beside him, my chest swelling with pride. After years of sacrifice, after dedicating my life to his education, I believed this was finally the moment. Perhaps tonight, in front of his colleagues, my son would introduce me with honor. Perhaps tonight he would acknowledge the man who had stood behind him through every storm. I straightened my jacket, smiled politely, and kept my steps slow, careful not to appear overwhelmed. He walked ahead confidently, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that I was part of his world. Then came the introduction. A group of his senior managers gathered around him, asking who I was. My heart pounded in anticipation. This was it. This was the moment I had waited for. I thought he would proudly say, "This is my father, the man who made me who I am." But instead he chuckled lightly, placed a hand on my shoulder, and said with a casual tone, "Oh, don't mind him. He's just the gardener." The laughter that followed was not cruel, but it was dismissive. To them, I was invisible, someone beneath their notice. I forced a smile, though my chest tightened like it was being squeezed in a vice. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. My son, the very one for whom I had bled, for whom I had worked nights and days, had stripped me of my dignity with a single sentence. Inside, I screamed. But outwardly, I remained calm. My silence was my shield. My eyes scanned the room, catching the subtle smirks and polite nods of strangers who now saw me as nothing more than a servant. My hands trembled, but I hid them in my pockets. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. My son mingled with his colleagues, laughed, boasted about his achievements. Not once did he turn back to acknowledge me. I sat at a corner table, pretending to admire the decor, my mind replaying those words again and again. He's just the gardener. I asked myself, had all my sacrifices been reduced to this? Every night of hunger, every day of toil, every coin saved for his education, was it all meaningless? When the dinner ended and we drove back in silence, I looked at him from the passenger seat. His face was calm, as though nothing had happened. Perhaps he thought I hadn't understood the insult. Perhaps he thought I was too naive to recognize humiliation. But he was wrong. Every word had pierced me like a dagger. Back home, I went straight to my room. I didn't speak. I didn't question him. Instead, I sat on my bed and stared at the wall. My mind wandered back to the nights when he was a child, lying sick with fever, and I had stayed awake tending to him. I thought of the mornings when I skipped meals so he could eat a full breakfast. I remembered the books I bought him with the money meant for my own shoes, and yet tonight all of that had been erased. But friends, understand this. Humiliation does not always crush a man. Sometimes it awakens something deeper. As I sat in silence, I felt something shift inside me. My disappointment turned into resolve. If he thought I was just a gardener, then perhaps he needed to learn a lesson. Not through anger, not through violence, but through truth. Respect is not given by titles, wealth, or power. It is earned by actions. And if my son had forgotten that, I knew one day life itself would remind him. That night after the banquet, I did not sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind caught between disbelief and pain. The words my son had spoken refused to leave me. He's just the gardener. Gardener. A stranger could have mistaken it as a harmless introduction, a joke, perhaps. But for me it was more than words. It was a betrayal of years, of sacrifices, of sleepless nights and endless toil. The sun rose the next morning, but the light did not touch my heart. I moved about my house quietly, performing my usual routine. To the world, nothing had changed. But within me, everything had shifted. My son, unaware of the storm inside me, carried on with his life as if the incident meant nothing. He greeted me casually at breakfast, asked if I needed anything, and then left for work with the same confidence as always. I watched him walk out the door, his polished shoes clicking against the floor, his tie perfectly knotted, his car gleaming in the driveway. I realized he had built his life on foundations I had laid, but he had long since forgotten who mixed the cement, who carried the bricks, who held the walls together. That evening, when he returned home, I decided to test something. I asked him softly, "Do you remember the nights I stayed awake when you had your exams? The nights when I walked to work so you could afford the bus fare?" He paused, then shrugged. "Of course, Dad, but everyone sacrifices. That's what parents are supposed to do." His words stung sharper than any insult. To him, everything I had done was not a gift. It was an obligation. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing worth remembering. That night, as I sat in the living room, I reflected on the path my life had taken. I thought of the years when I worked double shifts in construction, of the calluses on my hands, of the backaches that never left. All for him, always for him, but now, in front of his colleagues, I had been nothing more than just the gardener. I understood something then. Silence can protect dignity only for so long. If you let it linger too much, silence becomes consent, and I was not ready to consent to being erased from my own son's story. So I made a decision. I would not confront him with anger. No shouting, no accusations. Instead, I would remind him in the quietest but strongest way possible who I truly was. I would remind him that respect is not a decoration you wear for others to see. It is the root of every relationship. Without it, even the strongest bond shatters into dust. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A week later, my son hosted a dinner party at our home for some close business associates. He wanted everything to look perfect. The table set with fine china, the wine glasses polished, the garden trimmed and glowing with lights. Ironically, he asked me to help prepare the garden. As I worked silently among the flowers, trimming the hedges, setting the lanterns, I saw his guests arrive in suits and sparkling dresses. Laughter filled the air. My son walked proudly between them, exuding charm and confidence. And then, as I was carrying a tray of drinks into the living room, it happened again. One of his associates, noticing me, asked, "Oh, is this your father?" I stopped, standing still, waiting for his reply. My son looked directly at me, then turned to his associate and said with a dismissive chuckle, No, he just looks after the place. You know, the gardener." The words struck me harder than the first time. Not because of what he said, but because of the way he said it. Deliberate, confident, without hesitation. The room filled with polite laughter. Nobody realized the dagger he had just driven into my heart. But this time, something inside me hardened. I didn't flinch. I didn't lower my head. I placed the tray carefully on the table, looked him straight in the eyes, and for the first time I allowed my silence to speak volumes. He shifted uncomfortably, as though my gaze unsettled him. Perhaps in that instant he realized I was no longer the same quiet figure he could dismiss. That night, after everyone left, he found me in the garden. "Dad," he said casually, "thanks for helping out." I looked at him calmly and replied, "A gardener does what is needed. Isn't that what you said I am?" The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time, he had no answer. The night after the dinner party, I noticed something different in my son. He avoided my eyes more than usual. Perhaps it was the way I had answered him in the garden. Perhaps he had never seen me stand so calmly against his arrogance. He left early the next morning, claiming he had an important meeting. But I saw his hands trembling slightly as he picked up his briefcase. It wasn't fear, it was discomfort. My silence had unsettled him. Days passed. I continued with my routine, watering the plants, fixing little things around the villa, preparing small meals for myself. Outwardly, I looked like the gardener he had named me. But inwardly, my silence had grown louder than any words I could ever speak, and he heard it. One evening, I overheard him on the phone. His tone was sharp, his words rushed. No, don't ask about my father. He doesn't matter in these things. Just drop it." The moment I heard those words, I realized something. He was hiding me, not because I was a gardener, but because he was ashamed of where he came from. He was afraid the truth of his roots would tarnish the shiny image he had built, but life has a strange way of revealing truths. That very week, his company faced a crisis. A major project he was leading began to crumble due to financial mismanagement. The same colleagues who had once laughed with him now turned cold, questioning his leadership. He came home late every night, his shoulders slumped, his confidence fading. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. And for the first time in years, he sat beside me in the living room. Quiet and restless. "Dad," he muttered, finally not meeting my gaze. "Things aren't going well at work." I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch until he shifted uncomfortably. Then I said softly, "A gardener knows when roots are weak, even if the leaves look green." He froze, the meaning sinking into him. For once, he didn't have a clever reply. The next day, he asked me for advice. Not directly, of course. His pride wouldn't allow that. But in small questions, disguised as casual talk. What would you do if people stopped trusting you? How do you keep going when you feel everyone's against you? I answered him with stories from my own life. Stories of hardship, of nights when I worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, of days when neighbors mocked me for dreaming too big for a poor man. He listened, really listened. His eyes softened, his arrogance dimmed, even if just for a moment. But habits die hard. The very next evening, when one of his business partners visited our home, he once again introduced me, not as his father, but with a vague wave of his hand. "He helps around here." The sting returned, but this time I did not show it. I understood something now. Respect is not taught in one lesson. It is earned through the weight of truth pressing on someone's soul. My son was still trapped in his image, still running from the man who raised him, yet cracks had begun to appear. That night, after his partner left, I found him sitting alone in the dark garden. His head was bowed, his phone on the table beside him, buzzing with unanswered calls. For the first time, he looked small, like the boy I once held in my arms, lost and searching for direction. He looked up at me and whispered, "Dad, I don't know if I can fix this." I placed a hand on his shoulder and replied, "A gardener can tell you this much. If the roots are cared for, the tree can survive any storm. But if the roots are forgotten, even the tallest tree will fall." He didn't answer, but I saw it, the flicker of realization in his eyes. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm inside my son. His company's troubles had deepened. Investors were pulling out, clients were questioning every decision, and the polished smile he wore so easily had disappeared. I watched him pace the living room late into the night, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled. He was a shadow of the confident man who once strutted proudly through banquet halls. "Dad," he finally muttered, his voice cracking, "I don't know what to do. Everything I built, it's falling apart." For a moment I wanted to remind him of the nights he called me just the gardener. I wanted to throw his words back at him. But instead I sat quietly and let him speak. He buried his face in his hands. "I can't sleep. I can't eat. They're all waiting for me to fail. Maybe they were right. I'm not strong enough." I leaned forward, my tone steady. "Strength isn't built in boardrooms or on balance sheets. Strength is built in the fire of sacrifice. Do you know what sacrifice looks like, son?" His eyes lifted, tired but searching. "Sacrifice," I continued, "is walking 10 miles to work because your child needed bus fare. It's eating bread so he could have milk. It's hiding your hunger so he never felt his own." He swallowed hard. For the first time, tears glistened in his eyes. "You did all that?" "Yeah, for me," he whispered. I didn't answer. My silence was enough. The next day, the weight of his failing company grew heavier. Rumors spread quickly, and whispers reached him that his position might be replaced. He came home earlier than usual, collapsed into a chair, and stared at the floor. "Dad," he said softly, "I don't think I can face them tomorrow." I walked over to the window, looking out at the garden I had tended for years. "A tree that forgets its roots will always fall," I said quietly. "But a tree that returns to its roots can grow again, stronger than before." His voice broke. "And I called you the gardener." The words hung in the air, heavy with regret. He couldn't look at me. His arrogance, the mask he had worn for so long, was crumbling piece by piece. That night, he didn't eat. He didn't speak. He simply sat beside me, like a child lost in a storm, hoping the silence between us would offer comfort. Days passed, and each day chipped away at his pride. He started spending more time at home, avoiding social events. I noticed him watching me as I worked in the garden, watering the plants, trimming the roses, fixing the soil. Perhaps, for the first time, he was seeing not a gardener, but the man who had built his life. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with gold, he walked out into the garden. His voice was low, fragile. "Dad, I need you. I don't know how to fight this alone." I turned to him, holding the pruning shears in my hand. "You're not alone. You've never been alone. But respect, son. Respect is what keeps people by your side. Without it, even family drifts away." He lowered his head, shame washing over him. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything. For those words. For treating you like..." Less, it was the first time in years he had apologized. The boy I once raised, the man who had hidden me behind false titles, was finally breaking open, and though my heart ached from years of wounds, a small spark of hope lit within me. Perhaps the lesson was sinking in. Perhaps the gardener he once mocked was finally being seen for who he truly was. The days that followed were quiet. My son, once a man who lived in the spotlight, now lived in the shadows of his own mistakes. He spent more time at home, more time near me, as if searching for something he had lost long ago. One evening he came into my room, not dressed in his fine suit, not polished with pride, but in simple clothes. His voice was trembling. "Dad," he said, "I've been wrong all this time. I thought success was about titles, money and recognition. I forgot the roots. I forgot you." I looked at him, his eyes red from sleepless nights. This was not the arrogant man who once dismissed me as just the gardener. This was my son, the boy I had raised with sweat and sacrifice. He continued, his words spilling out like a confession. "At that banquet, at that dinner, every time I denied you, I thought I was protecting my image. But all I was doing was destroying myself. I lost respect for the one person who deserved it most. And now, when I've lost almost everything else, I finally see the truth." Silence filled the room. My heart, though wounded by years of pain, softened. Perhaps this was the moment I had been waiting for. Not revenge, not anger, but realization. I stood, walked to the window, and looked at the garden outside. "Do you know what makes a garden thrive, son?" I asked gently. He shook his head. "It's not the flowers. It's the soil, the roots, the part no one sees. Without them, the beauty fades. Without them, nothing lasts. His lips trembled. And you were the roots. For the first time in many years, he stepped forward and embraced me. His tears fell onto my shoulder. The man who once introduced me as a gardener now clung to me as if I were the foundation of his entire life. And in that embrace, I realized something important. Respect cannot be demanded. It cannot be forced. But when the truth of life strips away pride, respect is the only thing that remains. That night, my son promised me he would never again hide who I was. Not in front of his colleagues, not in front of strangers, not in front of anyone. And in the days that followed, I saw the change in him. At work, he began to speak of his humble beginnings. He told his partners, "I am the man I am today because of my father." He sacrificed everything for me. Some looked surprised. Others respected him more. But for me, it was never about the audience. It was about him. My son had finally understood the lesson. Friends, life has taught me many things, but above all, it has taught me this. Wealth fades, power shifts, success rises and falls. But respect is eternal. Without it, relationships are nothing but chains. With it, even silence speaks louder than words. And sometimes, when someone forgets that truth, life itself delivers the reminder. You've just heard my story here on Revenge Depth. Tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Stayed silent or spoken the truth? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And before you leave, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Revenge Depth for more powerful, real-life inspired stories. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we reveal lessons life never forgets.